Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, good. I just want to make a comment because I want to respond to somebody. So I got to be careful I don't make the same mistake I'm going to criticize them for. So let's see. Okay, this is what I'll just pull it up. Let's see. Share that. I know I would like it if people who made videos that I watch sometimes responded to my comments on video. So, by the way, you can Discerner. I haven't been on there for a while. I feel kind of bad, but Discerner, I've seen online for a long time. They have I'll share that next, but I'll do it now. So you should join if you want to like talk to people of different views on like a chat room. They have like this. Would I shut it off? Okay. This right here, Bereans apologetic. Is it showing it? Here. Okay, here. That should do it. Right here. So here's the you should join this just to have a conversation. I'll put in the chat the how you can join. It's free, of course. So you can post videos on there if you make your own content and just conversation about Christian doctrine and stuff. So, okay. Let's see. Alrighty. To the comment here. Okay, now I clicked off of it. By the way, if you see this, go to the synagogue's channel. He's going to have a conversation responding to Leighton Flowers, and a bunch of people are over there watching it. The synagogue. Here, I'll put in the here's for that, which is starting like 30 minutes. There's the address for that. That'd be good. All the cool kids are over there. Okie dokie. Where did I say that? Okay. So I think this criticism stands is exactly right. Okay, see that? Okay. So I think this is one of those like drive-by sort of comments anyway, but we'll see. Okay, this is the claim. Anyone who criticizes Calvinism, which I agree with this criticism, by the way, I criticize Calvinism on this fact, okay, for brutalizing the use of the word all in its context, right? And by the way, a lot of their excuses aren't wrong. It's just a question of should it apply, right? They got to come to the realization that there's all without distinction, all with distinction, all without, there's different categories that are real categories, right? But the context has to sort of inform that. And I think you can't really prove it either way, but you can prove it in this case particularly, right? Calvinists use the term all when Calvinists try to force limited atonement into universal language, right? Like, he didn't die for the sins of the whole world, not just ours, but that of the whole world. Okay. Well, what is it contrasting with? Well, I would argue in context, it's talking about everybody, anyone, like it's intended for all. Even Calvinists, like Calvin would suggest that in his writings, or at least hint at it. That's like one of those things where like linguistically you can't like say demand it in every case that it means universal. And you can point to times where it doesn't clearly mean universal, or at least not in our context of like, even though we all believe it applies to the whole world, that whole world to them wasn't like, other countries that they didn't know about in the first century, right? But it's like there's an intention, right? The known world would be the whole world as they knew it, which the limitation there is their knowledge. But now that we know more, it's a universal application. So obviously we would include all people, right? like in the judgment, for instance. Or like when old earthers say the flood flooded the whole world. Yeah, they didn't know about the whole world, and we scoff at that if we believe it's a worldwide flood, right? Even though Moses didn't know about the whole world. Why? Well, because it's the whole world as God knows it. Their limitations don't limit the use of the term. It's universal. But it is still true that there's times where all doesn't necessarily apply to every specific individual. And so I'm not quite sure how to always hash that out. But what about when it says all in all? In the end, it says God will be all in all in the end. What does that mean? Well, if any of those other uses of all is universal, okay, well, what does that suggest to you? God will be all in all in the end after everything's complete. Does that include people that are writhing in hell forever? I don't think so. I think their exact problem is that they don't have God in them, if you will, right? This is restorative language. I promise. So look, if you think Calvinists' use of all and their usage of it to say limited atonement, to try to hold on to limited atonement, and then you say God will be all in all can include people in hell suffering forever, not redeemed, you have no ground to stand on. Because this is even stronger language in context that clearly means in the end there won't be anything that's not restored. So yes, so Discerner said that's a universalist argument. And then I was like, I almost responded too quickly too. Well, actually, yeah, sure. It's a universalist argument. But universalism isn't true. So it depends on what argument do you mean. So sure, they use this argument because this argument does exclude seemingly the possibility of eternal conscious torment. But while it's true that either God tortures people forever is true or false, if it is false, and it is, it doesn't mean universalism is true. It means eternal conscious torment is false. So as long as they're not using it to try to prove universalism, fine. I agree with them. That verse is compatible with universalism and conditional immortality. It is not compatible with eternal conscious torment. That's the claim. Other verses you rule out many other obvious arguments, like ultimately universalists and eternal conscious torment advocates basically believe in they believe in the immortality of the soul. That all humans will never die the second death. That's why those two views are wrong, because the Bible doesn't teach that everybody has an immortal soul. That's paganism. That's making man God. That's making people have the attribute that the Bible says only God has. So if not believing in the Trinity makes you lost, then believing in the immortal soul would also make you lost, because you're either elevating man to equality with an attribute of God that the Bible clearly says God alone has. And so likewise, if I have to condemn people for not believing in the Trinity just right, if I have to buy that, then I have to say you're lost too, because you have another Jesus. If I have to condemn people who don't believe in the Trinity, then I have to condemn you for why is the Trinity important? Well, to preserve the unity and equality of the Father and the Son. But your Jesus doesn't keep the Sabbath. He did away with it. You make Jesus into the little horn, the man of sin, the man of lawlessness. If there ain't somebody who's another Jesus, you know what I mean? So, but I don't think that way. So I have to be consistent. And likewise, this is a good universalist argument when they're using it against eternal conscious torment by proper definitions of words in the Bible, because eternal conscious torment people deny the universal language of all in all. That's restorative language. People who are burning in hell forever. I guess if you make men God, then they would be God. So God would be all in all, since they're immortal, and that's an attribute that God alone has in the Bible. I guess you could be consistent and also a heretic at the same time. That's fine, I suppose. You can deny the promises of God, by making your Trinity expand to all humans, I guess. It would be how many humans that probably live? 20 billion, maybe? What's 20 billion in the Latin? 20 billion entity? I don't know. Seems like a lot of extra oneness, a lot of extra stuff to cram in there to that oneness of God, but 20 billion humans with immortal souls. But anyway, so yeah, it is a universalist argument because universalists are capable of making arguments. If it's a universalist argument, that are you trying to say universalists it's wrong because the universalists made it? Shoot. Some of them are Trinitarian. Does that mean Trinitarianism is wrong? Or lots of universalists believe in the deity of Christ. Does that mean the deity of Christ is wrong? But of course, I don't know what this is supposed to mean for sure. So, but if you're trying to dismiss this because you say it's a universalist argument, you're not thinking very well. And I thought you thought well, discerner. You usually think well. What's wrong with you? So anyway, let's see. I'm worried that you might be missing out on some good points people make because you dismiss them by their title you've given them, like maybe like Seventh-day Adventist or Universalist means they're wrong, so you don't learn anything from them. Trust me, there's stuff people could learn from both groups. I've learned stuff from Universalists too, actually. That's valuable, but I disagree with their universalism. See, their argument isn't wrong because they are universalists, by the way. If they use it to try to prove their view, it's a fallacy. Again, because there's three different possibilities. There's three categories of so I like to talk about that. Most views are that way. And two out of the three positions will usually agree with each other in opposition to the third view. You see this with hell, conditional immortality, annihilationism, and universal reconciliation. On a given aspect that is part of the belief, two of them will agree on that and the other view will disagree. So you and the universalists, if we look at the second death as being actual death and the first death is, say, like temporary, which is asleep, so they're not really dead, fully dead, then you and the universalists essentially agree that all human beings will never die. Because Jesus likens the first death to a sleep. So going with that, you guys are heretics because you ultimately think men have intrinsic immortality. So you deny that eternal life is a gift because you think everyone will live forever, either in heaven or hell. You guys are heretics together against the Bible in that belief. But since the Bible doesn't teach man is immortal, but in fact mortal, you heretics who believe heresy are going to be in the heresy club of immortality or innate immortalism, which is a heresy because God alone is innately immortal. So, let me just say this. The two peas in the pod of the Universalists and the Eternal Conscious Torment heretic pea pod club are anti-biblical in their denial of God alone being immortal with their club of innate immortalism in humanity, which is heretical heresy of the highest order and deserves the hottest of hellfire for your error, which makes you deserving of eternal conscious torment. I'm sure you agree with that, right? If in fact you're being unbiblical, which I'm showing that you are. What part of God alone has immortality don't you understand?